Did you know that sex outside of marriage and violence always go together? They feed off each other, they fuel each other. We're living in a world today that is filled with violence and also filled with sexual sin. Hi, my name's Andrew. Today I'm going to give you some ancient secrets that still apply to the modern world today. And today we're looking at the days of Noah. Now this is a really interesting time in history, and I want to remind us today that in Luke chapter 17 verse 26, Jesus said these words, "As it was in the days of Noah, so it will be in the days of the Son of Man." He was talking about the last days. So what he said was, just like it was in the days of Noah, it's going to be in the last days. Let's have a look what was going on in the days of Noah. In Genesis chapter 13 verse 2, we see that sexual immorality had just gone to another level. It had just gone cray-cray. It had gone crazy. Sex had gone from being something between a man and a woman who were married, who, were committed to each other, they loved each other before God, they gave themselves to each other, to a situation in Genesis 13 verse 2, where the Bible says women were literally sleeping with spiritual beings. The occultic practices had just gone to another level, and they were doing sexual things with demonic beings. And the Bible says there were giants in the earth in those days, and these big dudes were being born from these women because immorality had just gone to another level. But at the same time, God also says that the earth was filled with violence. That's in Genesis 13 verse 6. So we see incredible violence, that dudes were just beating each other up, attacking each other. There was this rage inside people's hearts at the same time as just sexual activity on a level that many of us can't relate to. But if you dig deep, people even today are getting involved in these sort of weird, bizarre sexual rituals and activities. And so sex outside of marriage and violence, they go together. And in our world today, in the Western world, domestic violence is a massive problem. And, why is there so much domestic violence? Because there's a rage inside people's hearts. Where does that rage come from? Well, the Bible says that when people commit sexual activity outside of marriage, the violence starts right there. Because it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 16, that when two human beings have sex together who aren't married, they actually become one flesh. They merge their souls, they merge their minds, they merge their bodies together. They become one. And even scientifically now it's been proven that when people have sexual activity with each other, they exchange DNA. It's such a tight, close thing. When you just randomly have sex with people, or people just randomly hook up and sleep with each other, they're exchanging DNA, they're becoming one flesh. And what the Bible says this is, it's a sin against their own body. When people commit sexual activity outside of marriage, it's a sin against their own body. It's an act of violence against your own soul, against your own body, and against the other person's soul and against their body. You're actually destroying something in someone else's life, and you're destroying something in your life. It's an act of violence. It's an act of soulish, emotional, physical, and mental violence. And it leads to rage. And the Bible says that sex was never designed for this. It was designed to be something between a man and a woman who were committed to each other, who love each other and have pledged themselves to each other. And as we say in the law in Australia, to the exclusion of all others. How many times do you read about a story of someone who's been cheated on and just that rage that comes into their heart? Why? Because they've formed a relationship with someone which is so close, they become one flesh. And when that's torn away, it leads to this rage. And so the Bible says that we should only engage in sexual activity when we are married. And we should only do that with the person that we are married to, because otherwise we're committing an act of violence against someone else's life and against our own life. So when someone says, "I love you," and, if you loved me, you'd sleep with me. If you're not married to that person, it's not true. If they really loved you, they'd want to honor you, they'd want to respect you, and they'd want to marry you to show that honor and show that respect before they even thought about engaging in sexual activity. Why? Because that's the way God designed it, and that's how God says we really express love to each other. We commit ourselves to each other before God, before friends and family, and that was always God's design for sex inside marriage. And that way sex and violence won't be so closely linked, and they won't feed and fuel each other and create all this rage that we're seeing in our society today.